Hello and welcome to Emergency Podcast. We are back to talk about all of the things that are broken in the UK right now and what exactly are we going to do to fix it. I'm Nigel.
And I'm Ian. And let's be honest, Nigel, we could be here all day on this one.
All day, all week, all year. We could literally just spend all the time talking about it, which maybe is the problem. Maybe action is what is needed to get things done. Last time we were together, we were talking about the fundamental things that were broken within the UK, and you succinctly put it together into kind of these three buckets that needed fixing: jobs, services, and community. And I know what we would like to do is really just dig into one of those now. Talk a little bit about what do we mean when we're saying that these things are broken. Is it really as broken as as we're saying it is? And so I thought we were going to start with jobs. I'll start with a bit of a question to you. When you put this together, jobs, what do you mean? Is it that there aren't enough jobs? Is it that the jobs aren't paying enough money? Is it that there are lots of other people coming over and taking all the jobs? I mean, what do you mean by jobs?
I'm certainly not on the latter point saying that there's all of these foreign migrants coming in and
Didn't
they've
think so.
taken our jobs. That's not the
Didn't think
issue
so.
at all. We have got a long-term systemic problem with employment in the UK where we've had really, really nasty pockets of unemployment in some communities for a long time where there just isn't the work to go with the people. A lot of them in ex-industrial areas. The industries have gone and nothing really has replaced it. We have got increasingly huge pockets now of underemployment where people can't get work no matter what they do. They can't get any more work. They're stuck on 12 hours or 15, 16 hours a week. And for various reasons, there's nothing more that they can do. But the thing that I think separates the othering, so it's always other people's problems versus my problems. And I think people have started to realize this now is no matter how hard so many people work, whether it's long hours or lots of effort or whatever else, they cannot earn enough money to pay the bills and live comfortably, right? It's just not possible. And it's had all kinds of names over the last few years, the squeezed middle and the cost of living crisis and all the rest of it. It's a jobs crisis, right? It's a jobs crisis where people are absolutely trapped by a system which doesn't give them a fair shot.
Yeah, yeah. I agree, and I think what I would caveat it with is I think it's a jobs crisis, but it's also to use the cost of living term, it's a bills crisis, right? It's the cost of everything is so much higher than it was, and that has gone up by so much more than the money in your pocket, the money you're getting paid, regardless of how many hours you're working. And look, I mean, I was doing a little bit of looking up on this morning because something that really winds me up, something that gets me so annoyed when people are going on about the issue with jobs, so when politicians are talking about the issues with jobs, they always talk about it from a couple of lenses. One is how many people are unemployed, the unemployment figures. That's been forever. That's all we talk about. It's like, and if we can get people off unemployment and into work, then that fixes the problem. And the second one is generally about the cost to the country, right? It's like there's loads of people who aren't working hard enough or aren't doing enough work. They're unemployed or they're not, or they're working part-time and they're not, and they're ultimately on benefits, right? And that's costing the taxpayer. And look, it's dog whistle politics, right? It's calling on, your next door neighbour can afford to Sky TV and they can afford to go out to the
It always
pub.
used to be
They
Sky
can
TV.
afford to do these things, but they're on benefits. How dare they spend that money on Sky TV and going to the pub?
Well, this wasn't this the point about the lunacy of DP Lee Anderson MP. He
Yeah,
basically goes, "Oh, all these people like complaining about money. I could feed family for 30p," and you think you're an absolute lunatic. That's just not reality for a load of people. And again, it's ignoring the problem and trying
it
to blame the person rather than the system that they're stuck in.
totally because look, it takes only the smallest amount of research to actually see. And I mean, well, or just looking outside and actually looking at the world to see that something is not quite right. And if you don't have to go back that far, but again, if we were to go back, if we went back to say the 1970s, that period that people love to look back to, generally, the way things worked is if it was a family, then one of the parents went out and worked full time, and the other parent normally did not work full time. They did sometimes, but they would, or they might do a bit of a part time job. And on average, doing that would pay enough money to pay the rent or get yourself on the housing ladder, pay all the bills, feed and clothe your children, and leave you with enough money left over to put aside for things like savings and the fun stuff like holidays and everything else. That was one of the most, for me, one of the most important things that came out of
And
post World War Two, right?
well, yeah, and look, okay, so you look back at, obviously we both grew up, late 70s into the 80s. So the technology that we have now didn't exist. So you weren't spending money on smartphones and fancy stuff like that. But at the same time, a TV set or a video recorder. I remember when your video recorders were the amazing new thing and cost an
Yeah,
absolute fortune relatively, right? So people paid a lot of money on those, but you still had them, right?
yeah,
As you say, off
exactly.
one wage would sort the whole family out. And even to the 70s, with runaway inflation because of energy prices, hint, it's happening again, right? But energy price driven inflation, wages generally kept up with it. So you still were in the position of being able to feed your family off a wage. And that's
Yeah,
gone.
exactly. Now, two parents can go out to work full time, and still not earn enough money to make ends meet. And that's before we consider single parent families and everything else, of which there is obviously a much higher proportion of now than there was back in the 1970s. But to kind of bring it home in terms of the numbers, I just looked a bit of it up. Started looking at kind of average salaries and an average cost of living. And if you are a family of four right now, the average combined earnings are around 3,500 a month, something like that after tax. You'll bring home. That's the average, right? There's obviously a lot of people earning way less than that. Okay, but that is the average. But to pay for your rent or mortgage, and most of it is rent. Well, not the most, but a lot of it is rent
A
now.
lot of
That's
it's rent.
increasing. Your gas, your electric, your water, your council tax, your food shopping, transport, whether that is public transport or having a car. And again, for anyone who says, oh, well, having a car is a luxury, you go spend a month trying to live your life with public transport and you will see that is an absolute joke. Childcare, if you need that, because again, if you're both going to go out to work, you need childcare. You can't just rely on the favors of friends.
I don't know what your experience was, but when we had our first child back in 2007, right? The cost of childcare for my wife to go back to work full time was the same as our mortgage.
Yeah, yeah.
At which
So,
point
so
she didn't go back to work full time because it was completely unaffordable.
Yeah, so the average monthly cost for rent outside of London, I've took us out of London because that skews things even more. It's even worse. £900 to £1,500 a month for rent, right? Childcare, £800 to £1,500 a month for childcare, right? So if both parents are going to go out to work, you're earning say £3,500 a month. Your costs are going to be at least £4,000 a month before you factor in the luxuries of Sky TV and going to the pub and going to restaurants and having holidays and everything else.
I'm confused though, Nigel, because I'm being told relentlessly in certain media outlets that the big cost scandal at the moment is VAT on private school fees, not these other things. So surely we've got it wrong.
I think we've talked about this before. VAT on school fees was a very classic, what they thought a quick win, right? Labour
Mm,
thought this was a really quick win because most people will be like, yeah, why should they? Why should they have charitable status? Why should they not be paying VAT? Unfortunately, it's now costing the government more money to have removed it than it was. Then again, that's a great example of not joining the dots up and not thinking about, rather than again othering and kind of
yeah,
saying, oh well, all those
absolutely.
people,
They
they're
shouldn't
all
be having it.
they shouldn't be having that. Really, what they should have been looking at is actually maybe our schools aren't funded enough and we need to find a good way, the right way to fund them. But again, when you consider those numbers, right? Again, you need more than £4,000 a month just to survive Now we want to get everyone on the housing ladder, right? That's the big thing in Britain. It's like it started back in the 70s and 80s. Let's get everybody buying houses because that's the right way to do it. Rental, paying rent is
Dead
it's
money.
dead money, right? But to get on the housing ladder, you need to have savings. You need to put money away. The average house in the UK costs £280,000, so you need 28k to afford just the deposit.
And how are you
How are they
supposed to
going to
do
save that?
that?
Yeah.
Exactly. You can't.
How can they save? How can they save the money? How can you save any money if you need more than £4,000 just to live?
And
That is the
this
fundamental problem.
and absolutely, this is the trap that so many people are stuck in. It doesn't matter how hard they work, they cannot earn enough money
No, no.
to be able to do that. And that's assuming they've got enough money to be able to just do the basics that month. And for increasing numbers, they don't.
Yeah,
What do we do
yeah.
about it?
I So this is where I think it brings us back to what we said at the beginning when you talked about kind of the jobs crisis that we
Mm.
face, and I said I think it's a jobs and a cost crisis, a bill crisis, because you can look at it in those two ways. It's like either work needs to pay more, like literally people need to earn way more money to afford stuff and to afford to actually live, or bills need to come down. The cost of things need to come down, or both, or it's a combination of
It's
both,
got to be
right?
both. It's
Yeah,
got to be both. But the reason why I call it a jobs crisis is because it is a literal crisis of the system. If work doesn't pay, what is the point in work? We've had this, all of these arguments over the years. Again, reactionary people start calling people, scroungers, or they're on benefits or whatever else. Well, I mean, there's 2.7 million people who are in work who get universal credit, and that this started with a different name under Tony Blair back in 1997 with working families tax credits, where they recognised then that wages didn't pay the bills, right? All the way back then, nearly 30 years ago, and we're still doing it. 20 billion pounds a year paid to people who
yeah,
are being paid, right? We're basically giving 20 billion pounds a year of subsidy to Tesco.
exactly. That is what it is. It's about we are subsidizing employers, private employers, to pay enough money for their employees. And that is not just, again, you mentioned Tesco's, that's not just big employers, that's across the board. And of course, whenever you talk about then squeezing employers or putting taxes up for employers or doing things for employers to employers that cost them money, of course the problem we end up in is the squeeze on small business. The small businesses are the ones that end up paying and end up struggling. The large businesses find the loopholes. They find the ways around, these things.
There's a and I've thought this for years, right? There is a simple solution to this one, which is, as well as big employers, small employers, whatever, not paying enough and being subsidized by the government, we're also in a skills crisis. So we have got employers who have stopped investing in skills and training, right? So you've got employees who are basically less productive because they don't know as much than their counterparts in France, Spain, Germany, wherever. So a lot of the productivity crisis is because we've stopped training people. So as a simple quid pro quo, right? And a lot of business complained when corporation tax went back up to 25%, having been lower previously. Well, okay, fine. We say to them, look, you can have your corporation tax down if you invest in training your workers. If you spend some money, we'll give you the money back. What's more, it's a free transaction, because if they're doing this and the workers are more productive and they're therefore earning more, we don't have to pay universal credit as an in-work benefit because they're earning more. So you literally stop giving it to the employers to do nothing and make them actually give something back to society.
Yeah, exactly. The skills crisis is. I mean, it has been talked about a fair bit. Certainly pre-election, there was a lot of
Mm.
talk about it. I don't think there's been as much talk about it post-election, but it's one of the biggest crises facing. I mean, look, there's a lot of crises facing the world and the country. Yeah, a lot of the evidence suggests that um, anywhere in the region of 1.2 to 1.4 billion jobs are going to be lost to all the new technologies that are coming in. But in
Aye.
return, yeah, but in return, a similar number of jobs are being created. It's not that the jobs are all going away and forever, and we're going to have 1.4 billion people in the world unemployed. There are other jobs, but the problem is nobody has the skills to do those jobs. And the countries that are investing, and again, China leading the world in here as well, India doing loads there, but a lot of those Western countries, and again, to be fair, Europe, the wider European Union is not doing great work on this yet, but they're doing better than the UK in terms of their investments. There's no real, again, it goes back to that joined up strategy. You know, everything impacts everything else. You know, if you get people earning more money, they pay more taxes, which means there's more money coming into the country. There's less people on benefits, which means you can then invest more money. It's the nicer side of a vicious circle, right?
It's the golden circle. Look, prosperity brings more prosperity. For so many people, they'll talk to you about how their town is crap, and there's a whole website of crap towns. I've lived in a few of them where they are decidedly run down and tatty. You know, Rochdale, where we both grew up, you go have a wander through Rochdale now. Okay, so they built a little new bit of shopping, but the main shopping street, as was, is largely shuttered and frankly has been for a long time,
Yeah,
where the foreign owners of the shops don't care whether they're let or not. It's literally an investment grade property, and as long as the value goes up over time, they don't want somebody in making a mess of it. With a
exactly.
closed shopping mall built in the 80s, where the developer went bust in the first place, and now it's sat there abandoned, and you've got urban explorers going in and doing videos. In terms of shops, a lot of the big shops have already gone, and it's been replaced with vape shops and charity
Yeah,
shops and no shops. And that's replicated across the country. So the money stops circulating because people haven't got any. And because they can't spend the money, therefore the small businesses and the shops and stuff can't pay their employees and can't pay their bills. And then they close, and then there's even less money going around, and everything goes down. So you've actually got to give people money to spend in the economy. If there's money being spent, then there's jobs being created. It is the virtuous circle to counter your vicious circle that you've just touched onto. This is why, whenever they start talking about cuts to welfare payments or benefits, I hate the word benefits, right? Welfare payments. We're going to cut the money to the most poor in our society. Fantastic job, boys. All it means is you're going to have even more businesses closing and even more jobs lost, and then even less money going around. It's genuinely stupid, but we keep doing it and then wondering why things are getting worse.
yeah. Yeah, and I don't look, and the reason why we're doing this is not just because we think we have all the answers. We know this is hard. This is unbelievably complicated because it's been going on for a long time. This decline started in the 70s maybe. Again we debated that last time when it actually started, but it was it was 50 years ago easily when that decline started, and nobody has done anything, or nobody's been willing to look forward. A lot of that is because politicians generally, so if we think about any politician, to be honest, are looking at the next election. They're thinking about, well, how do we get re-elected? And these things require significant amount of time and money and resources to resolve. But it can be done, right? It has
It
been done in the
can
past.
be done. And it's being done elsewhere. And there's attempts to try and do it here. Look, jobs, we need a lot of investment. We've stopped investing as a country, but there's so many employers who don't want to invest here because they look at the tax and regulatory and frankly political climate and think, you don't know what's going to happen next and it's going to be chaos. So they go out and do things elsewhere. So we stop investing, which means that we can't possibly start regenerating and renewing. If you go back, you're talking about going back 50 years. I can go back 250 years. Manchester, close to where we both grew up. Cities, industrial places like Manchester and Birmingham and other places actually had a development corporation who would go and put the infrastructure in that then allows new businesses to come into the area, and then they're all connected together and everything's driven. You've actually got to put the framework in to allow the businesses to come in. And because we've stopped investing, because investing is subsidy and communism or something, no wonder everything is crumbling, because you're just left with the remains of what you've got, and you're not really spending any money and maintaining it, never mind improving it. So understandably, everything just gets worse.
Yeah, and we can look at, obviously, I know it's dangerous sometimes to look at history kind of for all the answers, because the world has changed, right? Again, new technologies, obviously the competitiveness, or what Manchester was competing against back in 250 years ago were cities close to it. There were other cities in the UK was where the competition was. Now the competition is global, right? We're competing with all of our immediate neighbours and further afield as well. I've already mentioned China. But what always winds me up on this side is that there is such a lack of vision
Yeah.
and belief
Yeah.
that we can do it. Again, I don't want to hark back to we used to be an empire, we used to be this superpower, but we did, but we didn't become a superpower. And again, I don't want to get into all of the negatives of that, but we didn't become a superpower because of a lack of will. There was unbelievable will and belief that we were right in everything that we were doing there. Now, China has done the same thing. In the last 20 years, China's development has been unbelievable. You just go and Google a map, a comparison map of the train network, for example, the high-speed train network that they have put in. 20 years ago, nothing. Now it's the most advanced and expansive rail network with at the peak of technology in the world.
Also, look at some other smaller examples. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, cities who have basically said, we are going to go and invest and create an environment that people want to come to. And then they literally, Saudi Arabia's NEOM project, they are literally building a city in the desert, saying, look, at the moment it's empty desert, but we're going to build this and there's going to be 8 million people living there in 10 years.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
They're all going to be really rich. So it's back down to, look, when I lived in Stockton-on-Tees, the town centre was typical, run-down, underinvested in, frankly, an absolute mess. And like a lot of places, it suffers from proximity to other places. So just next door is Middlesbrough, which is even bigger. And then if you want shopping, you've got Newcastle and Gateshead Metro Centre and things like that within easy reach. So Stockton decided it's going to invest in its town centre, make it a nice place to come to. So it completely rebuilt the high street and added in, sort of new features like one of these dancing fountain things, and demolished some shops and basically said, right, the old shopping mall has gone and we're going to put everything over here. And the council bought them to refurbish them. It's not betting on other things elsewhere. And it built a hotel, right? It built a hotel which it owns right next door to the 4,000-seat theatre, which had been completely run down. And again, they took a whole load of lottery money and did the thing up. And all the way through, you had the political naysayers saying, oh, it's all going to be a waste of money. Oh, what a white elephant that's going to be. Oh, no one wants to come here. It's terrible. And yet it's been a massive success. And the same people who were saying it's a terrible idea are now trying to say it's marvellous and we are going to go out there and make it even better. You've got to do, as you put it, the vision thing. Right? There's got to be the will. We mentioned Manchester earlier. Manchester's had political leadership for the last 30 years saying, we are going to transform this city. And oh boy, have they transformed it. And Birmingham as well, a different party trying to do the same thing.
Exactly. Some of the cities are unrecognisable in a good way, but in the same way that a lot of the towns, small towns, large towns, are unrecognisable from what they were before because of the loss of industry. But that vision piece is so important. I always used to, get a laugh out of people when I used to say there is no reason, Silicon Valley, it was not preordained that Silicon Valley would be in the Bay Area in the United States. It could have been anywhere. It could have been in Sunderland. It could, and people laugh. They're like, no, it couldn't. It's like, of course it could. Did you know what Palo Alto and these places were like 40 years ago? They were just a bunch of farms. Low value fields as far as the eye could see. There was nothing there. And San Francisco was a city on its knees, struggling immensely. And America as a country was struggling immensely from a financial standpoint, from an economic standpoint. But again, the political will, the industrial will to go and build something and make something. And once the companies started developing, the tech companies, they didn't put barriers. The government didn't put up barriers to stop them or make it harder for them. They made it easier. They just kept piling in, making it a lot easier for them. And now the most expensive place to live in America is that part of America, right? The land values there are insane.
And it's not
some
farms
of the biggest
anymore.
companies came out of there. And there's no farms. There are literally no farms as far as I can see. It's just cities. It's just a city.
So this is the point, right? We're not saying that it's for government to create the jobs. It's the opposite. Government needs to stay out of creating jobs, but government needs to create the framework, the climate, the environment, the opportunity, absolutely, to be able to create the jobs. And our problem, our significant strategic error of the last however many decades you want to pick up is we've just decided it's all too expensive and too difficult, and we've stopped trying.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that we've actually got to go out there and say, no, these are our towns and we're going to. There's an element of like people have got to go out there and do this themselves, though. It's like, don't blame other people and don't blame politicians. Well, you elected the politicians. If you don't like the politicians that you've got, get somebody else doing it. Do it. How many people have gone out there and been that said, okay, we are going to go out there and solve this? People at the moment seem quite happy to go and shout at buildings, right? But they're not actually willing to step up and do anything that's actually productive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is the what we've lost. Without getting too far into the what we've lost from a political standpoint is the fear is the thing that kind of drives so many motivations at the moment. Whereas I'm still a firm believer, call me old-fashioned, that in the idea that hope, if you give people hope, it will trump fear any time. It genuinely will, because because people need it right now. They need hope and vision. Unfortunately, what we need from a political standpoint is for politicians to literally raise their head up. It doesn't have to be the leading politicians right now. It can be the next generation, putting their head up above the trenches and saying, I'm willing to say this. I'm willing to say it's about hope. I'm willing to say that there's a vision. I'm willing to say this is going to cost money to do, but we can have the next Silicon Valley or whatever we want to call it in the UK. We can lead in the technologies of the future as long as we are willing to take, and it is risks, as long as we're willing to take risk. And that is the problem with politicians now. They're petrified in Britain of any risk.
Absolutely. So I think we talked about the jobs from the why aren't there enough jobs and why aren't they paying any money? I do want to touch briefly, and we'll go into this in a lot more detail in other videos, on the cost side of it. As you said, jobs aren't paying the bills. Why? Well, not enough jobs paying enough money, but also the bills are too high. And you can neatly put why is everything so expensive into two buckets. And we've already touched on one of them, which is housing, and the other one is energy. And the housing one, just to throw this one on the table for a second, you said about, people see you're renting as a problem. And I said dead money. And you've got to go out there and you've got to buy your own house and so on. Okay, fine. That is something that's quite uniquely British. If you go to France and Spain and Germany and Netherlands and other places, they don't see renting as dead money. But they're paying a lot less for rents. And they're paying a lot less for rents, not because of what someone describes as social rents, but just because they have taken the private sector shills out of the market, because this rentier class who own all the property and then are getting fat off the profits of overcharging people. If you're paying, what was it you said, people were paying for your $1,500 a month or something?
Yeah, but I think it's between 1,000 and 1,500 in rent outside of London.
Right, so that is money that's not circulating through the economy, not being spent in shops, not giving people jobs, right? Instead, it's going into some fat git's pocket and he's banking it, right? And that's it. And the money isn't circulating because a very small number of people are taking all of the money and they're doing it themselves. So there is a way around it with housing. There is a way around it. And Angela Rayner said we need to build 1.5 million new homes or something by the end of the Parliament. Well, that's a start, but don't build private sector homes. Don't go out there and let Taylor Wimpey and Barrett and all of these other companies go and build what they want, because they're all going to build executive style homes crammed in as much as possible, where they're only building them at the point where they think they can realize the most profits. What we need are the local housing associations able to borrow at government rates and build apartments, nice apartments, right? The old council house adage has got a bad reputation, but if you look at it anywhere else in Europe, that's normal. Go out there and build houses because they're local. Here's the point, Nigel. Because they're only ever for rent and they're not for sale under any kind of we're going to sell the thing off to try and make people feel rich scheme as Thatcher did. But it's never for sale. So you don't have to charge market rents because you're not competing with that. And as soon as you flood the market with all of this, then the rentier fat gits can't get their 1,500 quid a month, and all of that property then goes back onto the market, and then suddenly there's a whole load of new places for people to live, and the cost of living in terms of how much money you're paying for accommodation goes whee, and all that money starts circulating in the economy again.
Exactly, because look, we cannot go on like this, right? It's like, it's very, very simple now that since, again, I keep using the 1970s, but that's because that's the when I've picked. But again, since the 1970s, the average rent to salary, ratio, it was 18%. It was 18% in the 1970s. It's 41% now of your salary goes on rent. That is not sustainable. It just isn't, and again, I think we touched on this last time. It's now, when we talk about managed decline, it was slow at first, and then it's accelerated. Just like climate change and everything else, right? It's like it's the same thing has happened in the last 10 years. Those ratios have accelerated beyond belief, and it's the same again with mortgage, on the mortgage side as well. But at least with a mortgage, you are paying off a property that is yours. You are, and then and that money is, again, like you say, circulating back into the economy.
And the point is as well, if we're going to build all these houses, then, and this is the problem Labour have got today, right? We're going to go out and build houses. Well, you can't build houses because we don't make enough bricks in the UK, right? As a starter for 10, we've got rid of industry, so we don't make enough bricks. We don't have enough trained builders. Whether it's joiners, brickies, electricians, plasterers, the whole smash. So to go out there and build all of the houses that people need, we're going to have to create jobs. We're going to train people, radical idea, I know. We're going to train people to actually do things.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's not, I think we've ended up, and I blame Simon Cowell for this, right? We've ended up with a generation where they think they don't want to do a proper day's graft. What they want to do is to go on X Factor and be famous or something. So things like building things has become uncool. We can make it cool again, and part of that's government branding, but we're going to have to go out there and get a whole load of people through college, learn them skills that's going to then give them a fantastic career, and then we can build the things that we need.
Yeah, exactly. Look, again, I will, as we close out this episode, I'm going to bring it back again to 1945, right? It's like a war had just ended. I think it's 4 or maybe 5 million servicemen, mainly men, coming back from overseas without jobs. We didn't keep them in the army and the RAF. The war was over. Did we just throw them out into unemployment? No. We created a whole load of jobs, right?
Can you imagine the reaction
we
now?
Built houses.
These scroungers.
These scroungers, these veterans who won a war. No, again, political will. We said we're going to build, I think it was, again, 1.5 million houses. And we did. We built houses, hospitals, reinvigorated the rail network. All of these things were done. And those jobs were created for, again, British people and people coming in from abroad when we needed additional labour. That is how you fix a problem.
All of these things can be fixed, right? We are clear about that. What we're lacking is the political will and the political vision to do any of it. Let me just throw one last thing on the table, and I won't go on at length on this one, but I said it's housing and it's energy, right? The energy cost crisis. I mean, it's turned into a political football because it's now people ardently defending net zero, right? Where net zero isn't actually now net zero, it's net minus because they want no oil, gas, or anything else ever being touched, right? Or on the other side, you've got the people saying, well, you're completely crazy and we need to get rid of everything that's renewables and go back to, good old fashioned burning gas and coal potentially and all of the other things. The reason why everything costs so much money in the United Kingdom today is because our energy prices are the highest in Europe. And they're the highest in Europe because we're constantly setting the price based on gas, right? Gas, entertainingly enough, we don't burn. We're only burning gas for 25% of the electricity that we make, and yet it sets the price 98% of the time. Uncouple the price of energy from the thing that we largely don't use, and the price of everything comes down because renewables are cheaper. I know they keep saying that they're not, but they are. And then the price of energy drops, and then the price of everything drops. And I do mean everything. Every single thing that you buy, if the price of energy is really high, the price of making it's really high, and therefore you're paying more.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to get this rather basic thing, right? When the people are saying turn the wind farms off, what they're saying is import more gas, which costs far more money, and then the cost of everything's going to go even higher. They are literally lying to you because they think you're stupid. It's that simple.
Yes. No, absolutely 100%. And that is why what we need is we need politicians with ideas who are willing to paint a picture of a hopeful, prosperous country for everyone that is not just continuing the status quo of doing it down. We hear this a lot, doing down Britain. It's like, oh, you're doing it down. It's like, no offense, every politician from every single party since 1970s has been doing down Britain. They have, because that's what managed decline is.
Doing it down.
Yeah, they have done this country down for 50 plus years.
In the next few ones, we're going to go and just skim the surface of services and community, because again, we need to get in and do those ones as well. But just as an optimistic note, and I know you keep saying 1945, we can go and fix these things, but why I'm optimistic, right? And bizarrely, it's because of Reform UK. Because although Reform UK aren't offering anything that I consider to be a viable solution, like Liz Truss, yay, Liz Truss, they're at least asking the right questions, even if, like Liz Truss, they're bonkers. But once a debate has actually been started as to, well, why are our energy bills so high? And why am I paying 1,500 quid a month in rent that I could be, spending down the shops? Hopefully we can actually start talking about these things, because we've been stuck in this stasis where no one wants to own up to it.
Yeah, and that is the great opportunity for actually the current political leaders out there, the ones who want to defeat reform, for them to turn around and say, hey, you know what, we're not going to follow their ideas, but you've asked a valid question. How do we fix these things? Why are these things so broken? Why are these things so expensive? Well, you know what? We're going to go away and we're going to find the way to fix this that is helpful for everyone and inclusive and all of those things, rather than divisive, right? I'm like you. Because these things have been fixed before, because we have faced these problems, these challenges before in our history, and we've come through it. It can be done, but only if people are willing to take those risks and to actually paint the country a vision, for me, a vision of hope.
And it all starts with voting.
Absolutely.
And the very, very, very final point, this isn't about telling people who to vote for, but actually this is more an appeal to the people who don't vote. If they start actually turning out and putting a cross in a box, they can transform the country, because they are almost the silent majority, the people who rightly are upset by everything, but have just got to the point of thinking there is no point in coming and trying to fix them. Well, there is. Go and vote, right? Whether you like the Brexit result or not. The reason why we had that result is because people who don't normally vote came out and voted. So voting can change the world.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Perfect. Well, look, we have not necessarily solved the problem, but we've thrown a good few ideas in there in terms of what can happen. And we are going to go get a lot deeper on these things. We're going to really start to break them down. But next time, I guess we will be talking about services. That will be interesting because there's a lot of those services, and you know what? Not many of them seem to be working very well. Thank you, Ian, as always. Everybody, please do like and subscribe if you like what we're doing. We're really going to try and accelerate how many of these things we're doing over the course of the coming weeks. And if you like what we do, come and come and comment on our videos. Ask us questions. We're more than happy to try and answer them all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ian, and see you
next
soon.
time.